Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Khoob. I'm here with an extremely important topic that has really caught my attention, and I think it will be very interesting and maybe even vital for you as well. Today, I want to talk about Alzheimer's. A lot of us think that Alzheimer's happens suddenly and without warning. It's as if it comes out of nowhere and takes away our memory and well being. But science is always uncovering secrets, and new findings show that this isn't the case. In fact, Alzheimer's is like a journey whose path is set years in advance. It's like a puzzle whose pieces gradually come together until we finally reach that endpoint, which is Alzheimer's itself. A groundbreaking new scientific study, with the help of artificial intelligence, has revealed these paths to us. Just imagine they're analyzing the medical records of millions of people to find pathways that could lead to Alzheimer's. It's as if, before the main alarm even goes off, our own body is already sending us signals in another language. If you want to know what these signals are, how you can recognize them, or even get off the path to Alzheimer's, watch this video until the end. In fact, these scientists examined the complete medical records of more than 24,000 people. They did this using a very advanced method through which they were able to extract different patterns and pathways. I've put the link to the article we're talking about in the description. It has also received a lot of attention on various medical websites. It was really interesting that they discovered people don't progress toward Alzheimer's in a single specific way. Rather, there are four main categories of pathways that people can fall into. These pathways differ from each other, and depending on which one you're on, the timing, early symptoms, and even the speed at which the disease progresses can all be different. Some people start down pathways that seem to reveal their psychological and emotional issues. For example, they may have a history of anxiety, depression, or sleep problems that could have led to Alzheimer's. It's as if these are a kind of early groundwork for the events that might later happen in their brains. I don't think these things can be considered unrelated to Alzheimer's anymore. That's a very important point in itself. The second group, which they've called encephalopathy, leads us to Alzheimer's much more quickly and can show stronger early signs of direct brain involvement. For example, someone who has a history of very mild strokes or even issues like urinary incontinence, it might seem normal, but it could actually be part of this process. It's very interesting that they said in this group, the onset age of Alzheimer's might even be earlier than in other types, which shows just how much that initial brain problem can affect the speed of the whole process. Just think about it, problems that seem unrelated, once we might not even associate with the brain, are actually taking a direct path toward Alzheimer's. These things really change our old perspective on Alzheimer's completely. We can no longer just say that Alzheimer's is simply a disease of old age. It might be a process that brings along many other factors and diseases with it. The third category that was heavily emphasized relates to mild cognitive impairment, or what we call MCI, which many of us may have heard of. This means it's the stage before Alzheimer's, where Alzheimer's hasn't fully developed yet, but the brain is gradually getting weaker. Many of the underlying factors in this category include chronic joint pain or even hormonal issues related to menopause in women. You wouldn't believe how much these are connected. Even knee pain that we experience and many of us try to ignore with painkillers, or hormonal disorders that many consider normal, can actually be clues pointing toward a path that leads us to memory and cognitive problems. Looking at illness this way is much more scientific and comprehensive, and it truly shows us how integrated our bodies are, how every small part can be a sign of a bigger event that may be awaiting us in the long run. So if we notice these pains or hormonal changes in those around us, we shouldn't just attribute them to age. We need to consider whether these could be warning signs of something else. They might be early warnings of developing Alzheimer's in the future. Now we come to the fourth category, which mainly involves issues with the brain's blood vessels and problems that occur in our arteries. As you know, when arteries become blocked or stiff, blood flow to the brain is disrupted, and the brain doesn't receive the oxygen and nutrients it needs. This too can gradually lead to problems with memory and thinking. In this category, conditions like uncontrolled high blood pressure, a history of stroke 7 minor ones we might not be aware of, and even issues with waste elimination by the kidneys can all contribute to the development of Alzheimer's. What's really important to know is that many of these risk factors are directly or indirectly linked to Alzheimer's. This article says that even in this category, those problems that occurred first and were in their early stages can over time much more clearly lead to Alzheimer's. In fact, we can say that these are small steps we pass by, but each step can push us toward a worse fate. Another very interesting part of this study was that they were able to determine how much each stage of these diseases increases the risk of Alzheimer's. In other words, they discovered patterns of progression that show us, for example, which diagnosis before another stage can lead us to Alzheimer's sooner. Even more interesting, in one of these pathways, when we reached issues like high blood pressure that were accompanied by depression and joint pain, the likelihood of developing Alzheimer's increased significantly. It's as if the brain could determine its exact path right from the very beginning. Just imagine how much this information could help us in the future with early diagnosis and prevention of Alzheimer's. We no longer have to just wait until memory loss happens to realize we have Alzheimer's. Instead, we can detect its signs even before Alzheimer's itself actually begins. Well, before I continue, I'd like to take a moment as a friend to ask you to support me in this video in any way you can and in whatever way is easiest for you. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, or share this video with others. And if you are outside the country, you have the option to send a super thanks or become a member. The link is below the videos next to the like and subscribe buttons. Doing this helps motivate me to keep going. It lets me know I'm on the right track, and if you don't want to support, I completely understand. In any case, thank you to each and every one of you for your support. Let's get back to the rest of the discussion. One point that this research really emphasizes is that we need to shift our perspective on Alzheimer's from seeing it as a simple single-stage disease to understanding it as a multi-stage process. That means each of these conditions that we might have previously overlooked, like back pain, chronic stress, or even poor eating habits, are actually putting together the pieces of the Alzheimer's puzzle. And what's even more interesting is that scientists can find patterns in this very ordinary medical data that show which patient is at risk of which pathway. It's as if these patterns can provide us with the kind of predictive diagnosis that even the doctors themselves weren't aware of. So if you have a family history or fall into any of the categories I mentioned, it wouldn't hurt to pay extra attention to Alzheimer's and make sure everything is under control. So when we see that our various illnesses fit together like pieces of a puzzle in a specific order, ultimately leading us to Alzheimer's, it's as if we are discovering a kind of personal predictor for our brain health. These patterns are truly striking because they show how seemingly unrelated problems like knee joint stiffness, a period of high stress, or even lack of sleep can set off a process in our brain that years later, if combined with damaged blood vessels and severe anxiety, can push us directly toward Alzheimer's. Scientists say that these patterns can even indicate the risk of Alzheimer's better than individual diagnosis. So if you have a family history of Alzheimer's, are older, or are currently facing challenges with your mental or physical health, it's time to take these signals very seriously and discuss them with your doctor. Because identifying these early stages before the effects of memory loss begin can provide many more opportunities in the future to prevent or at least slow down the progression of Alzheimer's. Remember, our brain is a complex and amazing machine that is always giving us information. We just need to learn how to listen to it and how to use this information for the benefit of our health. These Alzheimer's navigation patterns are like a treasure map that we already have in our hands, and by understanding them, we can choose better ways to protect our memory. So let's have a much simpler summary. So as we said, for example, if someone first experiences anxiety, then their blood pressure goes up, then they become depressed again, or even have urinary problems, when these things happen one after another, it's like buttons that gradually get switched on for Alzheimer's and sound the alarm for us. This study has opened a new window for us so that we no longer see Alzheimer's as just a disease related to aging or genetics, but rather as a possible result of a long-term process involving the interaction of various factors. Now, our responsibility is to act much more intelligently with this information. If we ourselves or people we know are going through these early stages, we can take action sooner, change our lifestyle, improve our diet, pay attention to our mental health and sleep, exercise, and keep an eye on our blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar. Because these studies have shown us that the path leading to Alzheimer's is both observable and, more importantly, changeable. So let's use knowledge and awareness to build a healthy future for our brains and hope to experience many long, high quality, and healthy years. Take care of your brain health. Until the next video, take care.